this is a paper that was written primarily, I have to say, by a research colleague, that Fenella, who's sitting over there, also from the Open University. And I've worked with for a number of years Dr. Paul Prinsloo, who's based in Unisa in South Africa. So if it doesn't make any sense, then you can largely blame him. He unfortunately couldn't come. I'm trying to move it on. Yeah, found it. Okay, so this is a short presentation. I will try and keep it short. Hopefully, if you're lucky, I'll finish early. We're going to cover briefly the notion of third space and its relevance to learning analytics, and provide for you the context of two very large open distance learning organizations that will hopefully illustrate some of the points that we're trying to make. There's obviously been a huge amount of work, of interest in student retention and completion. I'm sure that's one of the things that we're all very, very much interested in. And this work has been going on for a number of years. And yet it often seems that despite what we think we know about our students and their patterns of behaviour, we're not always managing to improve or even maintain completion rates. In the context of the university that I work for, and I'm feeling slightly guilty for publicly mentioning this, completion rates have fallen steadily over the last 40 years. And so we're very interested in finding out, more about what we can do. So this is where it gets slightly theoretical. I think it's fair to say that learning analytics can produce quite a focus on hard data, an impression that the success or otherwise of students is a matter of numbers and facts alone. What learning analytics can fail to capture are the complexities added by the ways in which student identities are often in flux. So the creation and attachment of labels to students may in some ways fail to fully represent the situations and the change that students are going through as they make their journey through their studies. So while we may understand that there are certain shared characteristics of students who are more likely, if we say, to fail to complete their studies, we don't necessarily fully understand why they fail, or even why those who do succeed manage to stay. The concept of third space that we're addressing in our short paper represents a complex space where students and institution are interacting, and where neither the student nor the institution has control nor a full understanding of those interactions. We suggest that there are three interrelated and interdependent factors that may impact on student success. One of those is the one that most of us will be very familiar with, and one which learning analytics does readily address. And the first is student attributes, which may include things such as academic and attitudinal factors, personal characteristics, or student circumstances. We'd also suggest that there are other factors. One would be institutional factors, so academic and non-academic and even administrative support provided, as well as supra-institutional factors, which may include macro-political or socio-economic factors. Just going to click quickly through this. So in this third space that we're talking about, a student often moves from what they would see as a highly structured world into a space where their identities, their ways of thinking and of being are being shaped by their engagement with academic debate. Students are partway through a liminal space between who they were at registration and what they are becoming. So there is some danger in labeling students while they're on this student walk towards establishing new identities and new ways of thinking. Learning analytics can be used to help us to understand students and their visible engagements with their institution, but we must take care not to immediately label or categorize them in ways that will restrict or possibly constrain their future success. In applying learning analytics, there should be an awareness that students, particularly those in our context, where we're in a large, open, distance learning situation, they can retain a number of different identities which are not necessarily visible to the institution. Oh. Should have read through my presentation fully first. Okay. I'm just going to give you a bit of context. The authors of this paper work for two very large open distance learning universities, the Open University in the UK and Unisa in South Africa. Both universities have access to vast amounts of data, and both have similar experiences of working to improve student retention through trying to make better sense of understanding the data that we have on students. I think it's fair to say that at an institutional level, we spend huge amounts of effort in developing an understanding of students and their characteristics or patterns of behaviour, and particularly in the patterns of behaviour that might make them less likely to succeed in their studies. And we do actually produce some data at modular level, which helps us to get a better understanding into completion rates, but they're fairly constricted, so we might look at ethnicity or gender, but we don't really go very much beyond those sorts of characteristics. This gives you an idea of a sort of scale that we each deal with. So we're pretty large universities, and we have huge data sets. I think what neither institution manages to achieve as yet is a tailored approach that more closely allows for students developing over the course of their studies, nor for evaluation of factors which may be more closely aligned to different subject areas or professional contexts. One of the problems that we have is that because we are distance learning institutions, we can only see what the students reveal to us. So we have a huge amount of information that they give to us at registration. We can see how they engage with their studies along the way, but there's a lot that's going on that we don't get to see at all. Because they are distance learning students, they're all working away, miles away from campus. They may never attend a tutorial, their tutor may never meet them. So the identity that we have for our students is often quite hidden, and it makes the challenge of using learning analytics in an ethical way, if I may say so, very difficult quite often. We are, however, at the Open University in the UK moving towards curriculum-based support, which will be largely facilitated by a learning analytics approach. So each of our subject areas is going to be split into subject support teams, and dashboards and other learning analytics tools will be used to track students. Those can be tailored depending on the subject area or professional context. They won't be static, they can evolve over time. And the aim is that as the students do progress along their student walk, we can adjust the sorts of support that we offer. We have in the past applied very large-scale vulnerability models, which assume that all students have similar characteristics, that they don't change, that if they were working this year, they'll be working in 2 years' time, or their economic situation won't have changed. These things should hopefully evolve, I think, over time as we bring into practice this curriculum-based support approach. Okay, last slide, you'll be pleased to hear. So clearly the potential for learning analytics is huge, and it could be used to facilitate tailored systems of student support, assessment strategies, and module design. And in doing this, there should be one eye on the student as an evolving individual shaped by their own experiences, some of which may be external to the institution. Going back to what Doug was talking about loops, closed loop systems. We should be learning from what the students are telling us about how they're changing. It shouldn't just be a one-way street where we just push them through and assume that everything stays the same. For distance learning institutions in particular, where no physical student campus may exist, this is really a much greater challenge than it may be for campus-based systems. And I've reached the end, with plenty of time to spare, hopefully.
Questions?
I floored you all with my use of liminal.
If you can, yes, please. Otherwise, no one will see you on the video.
I'm very intrigued by the third space and the constructs which are in the paper.
Yep.
The third space, in as much as I understand it, it's described as a space of becoming, where identities are negotiated, and I think many students' experience might be more that it's not so much a space where identities are negotiated, but where they are adapting to the requirements of the institution which they are when they move into the institutional space, they're having to fit to that institutional space. Have I understood the concept correctly? And can you say something, if you can, about the relationship between that flexible, negotiated space and the rather hierarchical and structured institutional systems?
Yes, thank you. I would say you have understood the concept correctly. I think the short answer is it somewhat depends on the institution and the context and how much flexibility the student has to create their own identity. So how rule-bound the institution is, perhaps. Often there's quite a lot of room for the student to maneuver and adapt and create their own identity as they go through. That's not always the case. I think it would, in my context, I would say it probably is the case, that we're not too constrained.
So let me add a question. The model you talked about toward the end of building a team around a subject and providing learning analytics support for instructors who might not otherwise be doing this work or maybe be prepared to analyze it gets at things that Doug was talking about too. How do we make this system work for people? So how is it envisioned that such a team will work in your context?
Gosh, that's a difficult question because we're so huge. It's the problem that we have is creating something that's differentiated and tailored for students at scale. So we can't obviously allow our tutors to go off and create their own models, their own. Basically, there will be support teams in place who will provide the model of learning analytics for a particular cohort of students. So either based on a qualification or a stage in the qualification. So yeah, part of the worries are, of course, about getting the right model and making the right decisions and choosing the right interventions. But each faculty team will be making their own decisions about what they see as the key measures, the key pieces of assessment. I mean, Doug's right. You only should assess what you're actually really interested in testing, and make sure it's relevant to what you want the students to learn. So the focus will very much be on the faculty staff to make sure that that's correct. And then the milestones and the interventions will be built around that.
One of the things that I think I'm seeing is that when people go to faculty members and say, what questions do you have about what's happening in your class or how it's working, they often have a long list. But if you say, what is learning analytics going to do for you, they say, I don't know. So that may be the place to start.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.